Hey, I'd like to call the meeting to order for the curriculum committee on this September 19th. We're meeting at 3 o'clock. I've been noted that all committee members are here. Approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
No public comments?
Do not believe so, and not by email, and we have no members in the audience of the public.
Okay. So the first item on the agenda to discuss is the spring 22 literacy data and Act 20 update.
Thank you, Mark, and
Thanks, Jim. I'm just gonna take a second just to kind of talk about the entirety of the agenda because I need to scoot out in just a moment. One of the things that we've talked about in this committee is building goals. I think that came up last year as far as like, what are they and how are we sharing them, et cetera. And I think that Tim and Amy walked through that process last year. As we started to look at that for going into this current year, we also wanted to kind of look at how we're doing our work around the goals. So certainly we've been kind of setting the goals that we have as a district level. And then our building goals are things that are set as our administrators work with many of our staff over the summer, towards the end of the school year, the summertime, and then when their staff return, and they finalize their goals with that. One of the things that Tim and Amy and I have talked about, particularly as we went through like 300 series of policies, is we've been really putting forth more efforts to kind of be more transparent with things like all of our curriculum items. So that's been a piece that I think right now are housed within Schoology, and eventually we'll find a way to be more visible so you can see kind of exactly kind of what's going on in our courses across the district. But in the same vein, we also wanted to see how we could be more diligent as far as talking about those things that really drive the rest of our district. And so that's what you're going to see when the principals are presenting here today, talking about their building goals, and then you'll see in front of you kind of the visual of how that's going to be presented. I think that professionalizes some of our work as far as what we're doing from a missions and vision standpoint. It also talks about our district priorities and the 5 really main areas that are part of our strategic plan. And then each school has their own kind of entity at the bottom, where we had to really kind of truncate down their goals to put them into a bit of layman's terms. We got rid of some of the jargon, but also tried to make sure that they were specific enough. So at least as a community person, board member, et cetera, you had a general idea of what our directions were to the school. I just wanted to kind of give you that kind of preamble before we went into today, because I think it's a great step forward for where we've been with those things, being more articulate as far as what our priorities are. I appreciate how the board has kind of put some of those things, particularly on the curricular and education end, in our last couple of iterations of our district goals. And I think this just ties in very nicely to that. So certainly this is kind of just a quick overview before you get into that deeper dive later on in the meeting, but I just wanted to put my endorsement behind it. I'm really proud of the work that my team has done as trying to really be more transparent with all these things, and also professionalize the ways that we present kind of who we are as a district.
thank you, Randy. So our first agenda item relates to some conversations we had earlier this calendar year, which was to begin to look more comprehensively in this place at our literacy data. There's no more important task we have than helping our kids grow in their ability to read and be literate individuals. So what we have today is all of our spring 2022 assessment data relating to literacy. And we have our local spring 2023 data. Our spring 23 state data we actually have. And if you want to see it, I can show you individually, but it's still on embargo. So if we were to look at it in a public meeting, that's something we can't do yet, but we'll be able to do it within a month or two. So we will come back to that in some way, shape, or form. It'll probably be something where we bring in our assessment results and kind of overall and kind of highlight those pieces. So we do have a slide deck. Amy and I are going to work on different slides, kind of depending on what the level is that's being depicted in here. And at the end, as you know, we have new reading legislation that's been enacted in the state. primarily for the elementary grades, and Amy will be walking us through some of the key topics on that. So the first thing we have to share is the forward exam. The forward exam is a state exam. It's computer-based. It covers all of the English language arts standards. So that's reading, that's writing, that's also listening and speaking. We administer the forward exam as all public schools and choice schools in Wisconsin do in grades 3 through 8 in English language arts. There is also a reading subscore on the forward exam, and we have some data to share with you on that. So the data we get on the forward exam is primarily achievement levels, which are fairly high proficiency standard. These are the performance descriptors the state has for the proficiency levels on the forward. And we also have percentile rank information that we're sharing. And so this is 3rd and 4th grade data. I don't know, Amy, if you want to speak to this.
Yep, so we have the 3rd grade overall ELA and then the reading sub-score, 4th grade ELA and 4th grade reading sub-score there. And then on the following 2 slides, we have 5th through 8th ELA and 5th through 8th reading. Generally, the reading sub-score is a little bit higher than the overall ELA sub-score for all grades except for 4th grade and 8th grade.
And one thing I would point out, and this is characteristic of all of our assessment data, I'm going to slip back on the overall ELA score for students. We do get a percentile rank on each student who takes the test. Our median percentile ranks here, you can see, are in the 60s or 70s in one instance, 6th grade. And of course, within the state, the typical median percentile would be 50 because this is a state distribution. So you can see at any grade level, our middle is higher than the state's middle. But for the reading sub-score, that's something where the state does not produce a percentile rank. So that's why we aren't able to provide you with that information here.
The forward exam feeds into our state report card.
It does. So for all of our elementary schools, the intermediate school, and the middle school, the state assessment data that's driving the student achievement target area, the growth area, and the achievement data that's driving the target group is all coming from the forward exam. So this is a very significant exam in terms of the state accountability system. But at the high school, we have different assessments. And so in the spring of 2022, we still had the Aspire. That's since been replaced by the pre-ACT. That was the part of the ACT family of assessments that's administered at 9th grade and 10th grade. We also have the ACT, which is administered statewide for juniors in Wisconsin. And so the state also has a standard setting process for these assessments. These performance descriptors are intended to be generally aligned to the performance levels of the forward exam, but you'll notice that the language that's used to describe this is somewhat different. And again, this is relating to ideas of text complexity that are part of the ACT sequence. And so what we see, again, are advanced, proficient, basic, below basic numbers are not tested numbers. If you took out our not tested numbers, particularly for 9th and 10th grade in 2022, and just had the percentages in the 4 performance levels being percentages not of our total student population, but students who took the exam, they'd be higher. We had significant non-tested numbers in 2022. And you can see what our median percentile ranks were, again, in the sixties as they were for the forward, although that 11th grade ACT was low for us at a 60. That is historically low for us.
So tell me again how the not tested factor in, they're the person's accounted for, but 0 for a score, or
So it depends on the report. When the state gives us our data, and usually when the state presents it to the public just as data, they will show you the non-tested numbers. And so if you see, for example, 15% advanced on 9th grade Aspire, that would be 15% of your students of your enrollment, not 15% of students who took the test. An important distinction is for the report card, the state report card, it's only for your test takers. So for the report card, and I believe we're anchoring our district achievement goal off the report card. The report card, our performance is not impacted by the not tested.
I don't know if you can share this, but did we have improvement in that area for last year? Do we have more kids?
We had more test participation, but 9th and 10th grade still weren't where 11th grade was. That continues to be a work in progress for us, but there was improvement.
Okay.
So is there a concern if the number of basic and below in the 11th grade ACT compared to the 10th and 9th grade Aspire?
So I think part of what you're seeing here is students are not tested for a variety of reasons. One inference we could make from this, you'd really want to test this as these grades promoted up to taking the ACT as juniors, is that a greater share of the non-tested mix were perhaps some of our less proficient students. Although we also know we have highly proficient students that are in the not tested too, but the overall mix. That having been said, that level of performance on the ACT is historically low for us. So I guess, you know, so I am concerned. I am concerned a little less because of how the 11th grade compared to the 9th and 10th than how the 11th grade compared to previous 11th grade test administrations.
Right.
But you know, one thing we did last year is we did bring a consultant in from ACT. So again, this is spring 2022 data. Last fall, we brought in a consultant from ACT to work with the English team. You know, when we see our ACT results this year, we'll see to what degree there were some shifts.
Is it a different type of rigor for the ACT versus 10th grade Aspire?
So not so much. So first of all, no. They're just progressive. There are some concepts that are measured on the 11th grade ACT that aren't assessed on the 9th or 10th because they are concepts that ACT feels students in the 9th or 10th grade are unlikely to have had exposure to. The big difference between the Aspire and the ACT is that the Aspire is a technology-based assessment. The ACT in Wisconsin, although there is a computer-based option, is still predominantly administered as a paper and pencil assessment. That's what we do. The big difference between the Aspire and the and the pre-ACT, which is what we'll be seeing for spring 2023, is not so much in the areas of so the Aspire for math and science has what we would call some has some interactive item types to reflect the nature of those disciplines. The English assessment is pretty much the same design as the ACT, just on technology, same for the reading. However, the Aspire, like the ACT plus writing, which is the junior ACT, has a writing component. The pre-ACT does not have a writing component. But to your question, Mark, there's a lot of similarity between the item types and the two assessments, particularly in ELA.
This is just kind of a random question, but do we know what percentage of our students take our advanced English courses? And if there's any kind of correlation with any of these results?
So we have not specifically pulled the data. We certainly know who those students are.
Yeah.
If you wanted to see that, we would expect to see students taking the advanced sections or say AP Lincoln Comp, AP Latin Comp courses like that. I feel confident without actually pulling the actual data, they're going to score higher on that. If that's something you'd like to see, we can bring that back.
I was just curious if,
Yeah.
you know, if we've got 11th grade, we've got 8% of our students are in advanced courses and that correlates with how they score. I don't know. That's just.
This is the reading readiness. So as you break down the ACT in reading, which is one of so for the state, the ELA is meant to mirror the forward. It's assessing all of the ELA standards. ACT also has a reading test. The reading test will give you a percentage of overall reading readiness. It will show you breakdowns on readiness in the areas of craft and structure, integration of knowledge and ideas, and key ideas and details. And you can see our median percentiles at the bottom. I will say that in the spring of 2022, our reading performance was higher than the English test performance on the ACT. So our reading data on the ACT in 2022 was a little bit higher than our overall ELA data. And now we have read grade level text, which is elementary report card data.
Yeah, so then we've also pulled in some of our local metrics. So one would be a report card. So we have standards-based report cards at the elementary level. So there'll be many different items that the teachers will assess on the student's reading ability. But this particular grade is responding to how well the students can read grade level text, and that's typically done by sampling oral reading, answering comprehension questions, things like that. So I believe this is 22, and then we have 23 on the next slide. Between those 2 years, there was between a 4% and 11% increase from 2022, depending on the grade. And then the next 2 slides would be intermediate 5th and 6th grade from 22 to 23. And those were pretty comparable between the 2 years.
So on the level of reading, how do we ensure fidelity of assessment because it's all subjective?
I mean, I guess I would push back that it's all subjective. I mean, we use common text, we use common protocols, all that.
So, okay, all right, and it's a level of reading. Do the students read? Or could they possibly be tested with what they've already read?
So there's more than just one assessment that would go into a report card grade. So teachers are always gathering those notes through conferring, through independent reading, through small group instruction, through a running record assessment. So it's really a large.
So it's not just based on an observation with the reading.
It's not a single.
I mean, that's how you kind of pick what level they're at, right? But that's not how you test them. That's not their test work.
So for a report card grade, we wouldn't use just one test.
Yeah.
So it might be cold read, it might be a book that they haven't read before, would be one aspect of it. It might be a repeated reading through a small group observation. It might be conferring grade, so it would be many different observations that the teacher would use.
And then are the teachers frequently, what's the word? Calibrated, they work together, so they're, how often does that happen? Or so that they're all kind of trying to view things from the same perspective.
Yeah, because they are in the professional learning communities weekly, I feel like the grade level teams at a building are pretty tight.
Good, thank you.
And then another one of our local pieces that we pulled out was STAR, and that's an assessment from Renaissance Learning. And there are two different tests that use the same overall scale. The first one is early literacy, and we are now using this in 4K, starting in 4K. This replaces PALS, was one of our previous early literacy assessments. This is what meets the current statute requirement of a reading readiness assessment. So because the STAR scale is continuous, once a child has demonstrated mastery, we do move them into the STAR reading assessment. And so you'll see different numbers of students assessed at different grade levels. It's fairly fluid for K2, which assessment a child might take depending on how they're performing. So we can dig into this a little bit. So we have the early literacy for two years here, the 22 and then the 23. Those are really fairly similar. There was a little bump up in first grade, but otherwise K and second were pretty consistent. One variable was the number of students. We tested far fewer second graders the second year, because we were able to move them into the reading portion of the assessment. And then we do administer the STAR reading for nearly all second graders through sixth graders, and then some first graders, depending on how well they scored on the early literacy. And so we have 22 and 23 data for those. The 23 data is actually a few percentages lower than our 22 data. We're not sure why that might be. We did implement a new phonics curriculum at grades K2. Sometimes you'll see an implementation dip when you start a new resource. So that's something that we'll want to look at our spring 24 data and see what that's like. This is likely, or maybe not likely, possibly our last year for STAR, because this is our selected assessment, and now with Act 20 we'll be given a screener. So I'm not sure what that screener will be, and that will be for 4K through 3 next year.
So then we'll have to, could we still use the STAR for 5 through, or 4 through 6?
We could, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
At the middle school, we do not use the STAR. We use the iReady assessment. And so we have assessment data from 2 years here. So I think something to know is that, like the STAR, the iReady is an adaptive assessment. Our basic report will show that tier of performance, and then placements by domains. And so when you look at what we might think of as foundational literacy skills by the middle level, and by this I'm speaking of phonological, I'm speaking of this data over here on the right, which is phonological awareness, phonics, and high frequency words. These are literacy skills that students, almost without exception, have mastered well before middle school. So the students you would see here that are these little slivers, these are students that are either English learners who are fairly new to the English language, or they're students with an IEP because of some of their academic delays. But again, the iReady is intended to measure a across a broad domain, but these are some of the areas that are being targeted more in Act 20. But I would say in terms of where we are at, these performance level descriptors are very close to what you'd see for the Ford exam and the ACT suite performance level. So these are intended to be aligned with college readiness. And so you can see that for spring 22, the tier 1 fully at grade level was at 62%, and 8th grade was at 59%. And the next year, did not add this. We will bring back the spring 23. I apologize. They did go up a few percentage points over spring 22. We did see 2023 gains on the iReady
For both 7th and 8th grade.
for both 7th and 8th grade. Yeah, and we have another slide. I'll bring those slides over and we will update the board book with that. Now, that having been said, we still have students that are at-risk levels. These are students that we would address during the win time. This is partly why Brian, who's stepped out for a minute, this year, our reading support position at the high school went from a 50% to 100% position. That was a budget request that you supported. So, you know, as we've seen higher levels of need than we've seen in the past, we've looked to add additional resources. And then when our state results come off of embargo, either next month, they'll come off embargo sometime in October. That I know. The question is, will we be bringing them in? Will they be off embargo by the time you meet, which is October 17th, or will it be after that? We will bring them in at the earliest opportunity to your meeting.
And you probably explained this last year again, but explain to me again why they go on embargo for the reason.
So I can't tell you why they're on embargo quite as long as they are. This was actually something Jeff and I were talking about early today. But the state gets us our student results back in the summer. So if I wanted, you know, if you're a teacher, Ted, and you want to know how I did, do I need something extra? We know that by the summer. But that's in terms of something we can do with individual students. If it's a question of using it for something more significant like the report card, the DPI wants to do a lot of data quality, which really has to do with counting towards the calculations. So while most of our kids are with us the entire year, sometimes students switch schools. So let's say I move during the year. DPI will use the time between when we get the results back and when they take them off to embargo to look at when I move schools during the year. And should I count for Waunakee? Or should I maybe count for Sun Prairie, for example? And it's that kind of data quality they're doing behind the scenes. The other thing is for the report card, they're doing value added calculations. Some of those depend on demographics. So they go back and they look at things like some of the students' demographics to make sure that they can provide the accurate data on the report card.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, any questions on the assessment data?
Well, yeah. After looking at this again and again, I just have to ask, what can we do better? Because with my conservative calculations, we're talking about 1,200 students that are below proficiency at all levels combined. And in terms of reading, that's not just using the ELA, that's trying to the reading sub-scores to come up with these numbers. And it's and I use the star for this versus the forward where I put, and it just seems, you know, that's a huge number of kids that are going to have limited opportunities post-graduation unless we're able to do something different. and it's, I know we're working hard and especially, you know, reduce a lot of the directions, the district goals with the get back to the 2018 scores. As a starting point, I did a quick skim and saw some really exciting goals set for reading in here, but are we doing things, are we looking at doing things differently to try to fix that number? It's a, you know, we're working really hard, but I guess that's my question.
So I think the answer is yes, we're trying to do some things differently. You know, we will need to see if what we are doing leads to significant progress or not. And then we may need to adjust what we are doing. But, you know, as Amy mentioned, you know, at the elementary level, a new set of phonics resources was implemented last year. And actually, I believe that's being extended up to third grade this year. And so that would be an example of the pilot of new English language arts materials currently underway at the middle school. You know, the high school increased their staffing for the reading support position. The person we hired to fill that position, because we also had turnover in that position, she's looking at implementing some new resources in that model. So these are all areas that are being looked at, but I think the thing we need to track is, in line with the achievement goal, where are the results? Because you look at this and, you know, as I mentioned at the beginning, and I know Amy, you know, fully agrees with this. I mean, we're all very passionate about literacy. There's nothing more important that we do here on that. We want as many students at the proficient level on these benchmarks as possible. Now, it's not always a clear line. If you're on one side of the line, that doesn't mean I don't have options. And it doesn't mean if you're on the other side of the line that it's made and it's, you know, what lies ahead of you after high school isn't going to be potentially academically effortful for you. But yeah, I mean, it's true. When you look at our student tracker data, which we don't have today, but that's where we look at our post-secondary outcomes for kids, we will see proficient versus not proficient in ELA and also mathematics do lead to noticeable differences about who continues on to higher education and who doesn't. And for those who continue on to higher education, their persistence rates and their 6-year completion rates. Although if we were to pull that data out, which we're probably due to bring that back later in the year, we would see that there are students who aren't proficient that do have satisfactory post-secondary outcomes. But there's definitely a gap, which is why this is an important conversation we're having here today. And I think, again, in line with the goals, which you're about to hear about, you know, we want to get back to where we were pre-pandemic, but I don't think we would say where we were pre-pandemic means we stop there. We want to get back there first, and then we want to step off of that foundation and I think move ahead even more. So, and I think part of that is going to be what happens with Act 20. So I'm going to move the clicker over to Amy here.
So there's not much yet to report about Act 20, but the DPI did put in FAQs on their website. And so there are some answers that are helpful there. A lot of it is still TBD, but I included the link in the slides. If you'd like to check those out, feel free to do so. One aspect that I wanted to talk about is the required training piece in Act 20, and the legislation is requiring all kindergarten through third grade teachers to complete a reading training on this list, the Center for Effective Reading Instruction. That also would include special education teachers, our ESL bilingual teachers, reading teachers, etc. And I just do want to point out to the board that there is no funding for this training. Even though we'll talk about, you know, this is a $50 million bill, it is not funding this training. This is solely at the district expense. So we've been working on how we might fulfill this requirement. So here's just a example of how we might do that. So one of the courses that we may choose would cost $400 per teacher. It's 36 hours of training. We don't have 36 hours of professional development days available to us. So we would grab 2 of those days so that we could do 14 hours of that during the school year. Then we would have to look at the other 22 hours to be compensated some other way. When I was meeting with the principals this morning, we were thinking the curriculum rate might be the best way to accomplish that, or maybe points if the teachers wanted. But this is something that will be an expense that we had not budgeted for, that we will need to allocate funding for that. Some other aspects of Act 20, we won't know a lot until this early literacy curricula council is established, and they are working on that right now. I attended a webinar with DPI, and they talked about that screener that I just mentioned earlier. They're doing a request for proposals now, and that will be a single statewide screener. So that would be something that we'll adopt then, I believe, starting next year already. And then there will be some changes that we'll have to make for our intervention model. There is going to be a list of required diagnostic assessments. We could choose from that list, but it will be a list that we'll need to choose from. There are some other aspects of that, like a personal reading plan that we'll need to provide, that DPI is hoping to provide a template for. There's some parental notification requirements that they're hoping that they could fold into that screener piece for us. So there's still a lot of question marks, but the one thing that we were hoping to go forward with this year yet is the training piece. So that's a little bit of what we know about Act 20.
And as it relates to Act 20, so we implemented the new phonics curriculum for K-2, and now it sounds like this year.
Yep, this
year's grade.
Yep.
So do you anticipate, so we've got training for our staff that we need to fund $120,000. Implementing the new diagnostics, the new assessments. Do you anticipate that we will be making shift in more of our curriculum too then after this training?
Well, the training isn't on curricula. The training is just on some theory and best practices that could be applied through any resource. It's not curriculum specific, the 36 hours of training. So we have made some shifts already, like you said, with our foundation. So that's K through 3. We have our Hager needs and unit awareness for K through K. 2 of our other resources are already, I would say, meeting the qualifications of the science of reading. So making meaning and being a writer are 2 core resources for ELA, and those are from the Center for the Collaborative Classroom, and they have a very strong research science of reading background. So I feel like they will be in compliance, but again, some of this will have to just kind of wait and see what the council comes out with. Anything else?
So that $120,000, we need to run that through our budget.
We do it.
So is that how that works typically? If there's a new, we run it through them and then it comes through.
Yeah, so I do have this on Randy's radar, so yes, we'll work through whatever channels we need to for that. Okay. All right, I think that's it for this one.
Just out of curiosity, is this gonna affect the trials? What was it with math that you were looking at
We are currently
Oh,
piloting,
so,
2 different math
so just gonna
resources.
make it more complicated, it's not gonna stall the pilot.
We feel really strongly about continuing with the
Right.
pilot,
Perfect.
just knowing that, so that the teachers know that this wasn't also part of our plan, that now we'll adjust.
Thank you.
I think we can go back to the agenda, Rebecca. And so now we are into the part of our agenda where we have presentation on school goals. And we have everybody except Sheila with us, and I expect we'll see Sheila in about 10 minutes. But Dan, I know you want to lead off. And so if you could just
Lead off.
maybe come up to the chair and we will get these documents into board book. Could you maybe bring them up school by school? Just, it could be a help for us. So let's start with Heritage. And school, so what we, just to kind of tee this up and then kick it over to Dan so he can kick us off here. These are high-level sheets designed to introduce you and depending on your feedback, we're pretty happy with these, but we want your feedback as an introduction to families and the community at large with the school level goals for this year. So really have to give a huge shout out and expression of thanks to Annie, who worked very hard to bring this format to life. So it'll include our district goals and our 5 district priority areas on top, and then for each school on the bottom, we have a quote from the school leadership, and then an enumeration of the 2023 building goals. And Dan is going to start us off with the heritage goals.
Thank you. Just real briefly though, Sheila would have kicked off. She is actually having some school bus transportation issues she's working through, so she's a little bit behind. Yeah, thanks for giving us a chance to share about our goals. Our goals are really important to us. It's what we keep bringing back in front of staff to give us our direction and make progress. So this year we have the 3rd year of a 3-year goal. So it's the final year of our goal of reading achievement based, where we are looking at 2 things at one time. The first trigger here was a disproportionality piece we discovered a few years ago. So we created a goal that was specific to students of color. And if they weren't at a proficient level or better, our goal is to make 11 months gain in a 9-month school year. So that's kind of our catch up, if you will, type of goal with that. So that's reading based. And since we're putting together a number of action plans to help us achieve that goal, we were like, well, let's throw a second layer of reading achievement onto that, and let's make a achievement goal for all students. And that was a 3-year goal. We were starting at 60% and then 70%. This year's final year at 80%. And we have the first year for our disproportionality goal, we fell a little short. Last year we made it. This year, for the all students, we are again we're making a mark. So we're excited about the reading. So that's the reading achievement goal. I'm not sure how deep in the weeds you want. I don't know if you want action plans and all that, or just kind of the general overview of background.
I was just curious if you use STAR testing for this.
We do not use STAR testing for that one. We are using actually the font testing vanilla is one of the measures for grade level. But like Amy had explained earlier, you know, our goal is to read at grade level. So we're going to use the multiple measures on that.
Okay.
All the things that Amy had shared, how it's, you know, when we get to that report card, it's going to be, what did I see in small group? What did I see in one-on-one? What did I see in large group? What did I see when I was doing, you know, IDRs, different things. So the read at grade level is, yeah, multiple measures.
Okay.
So next, at the end of the year, when we get this next report, what we should be looking at is the grade level assessment, not the STAR for remainder of those goals, correct? STAR can be part of that conversation. We're looking at achieving it, but you're right, it'll be more grade level, report card. So the other goal we have this year is a new goal to us, and this fund right out of last year's school district, the district climate culture goal. When we started looking at that data, we realized that there was one that really stood out to us, and that's pertaining to the professional learning communities, where staff, only 57% of the staff basically said, yeah, this is a good use for our time. And we were like, huh, we're hoping for quite a bit higher than that. We were feeling like our PLC work and direction was strong and solid, but the data is the data. So we vetted that out through a few processes, and we now have a goal where basically we're going to spend more time and energy concentrating on our PLC processes, a variety of things to get that done. But again, I don't know if we all go into the weeds on our action plans and strategies. We'll be here a long time. I don't know what you're all looking for. I was happy to lead off.
Yeah, and I think our format, just real quick before you go, Dan, any quick questions for Dan? And if you have deeper questions, we can always put a sticker in that and kind of come back to it in a future meeting, just in the interest.
Do you have any sense why only 50%, or is there specifics to that? And
You know, as we tried to work through that, Ted, I think that there were, we had a number of new staff last year in new teams. And not to say that you can't put a new team together and develop some good feelings of what's going on. I believe this culture and climate survey was given in the late fall last year. Does that seem right, everybody? Late fall?
Yes.
You know, so the teams that took this were probably truly feeling, I don't know if it's a good use of my time. I'm brand new here and I haven't found how this really works well. On a very kind of neat professional for us, we had far fewer new staff this year. So those teams are a little more, you know, stable, if you will, in the membership. So that could be one thing. The other thing is, you know, we throw different processes and procedures at teams for how to use time, how to use agendas, how to use norms and agreements. And, you know, that's something that we will be rethinking and refining. But I think honestly, I mean, the number of heritage staff and all staff that went to the PLC Institute or in July was really respectable, and now bringing in the solution tree consultants in November. This all really made a lot of sense to us. Great. All right. Yeah, thank you. I'm gonna listen probably I can, but if I need to leave, at some point, I just have to point that myself.
Dean, would you like to go next? Be better at K4.
Good, take these care. Thanks again for having us in tonight. For Prairie, very similar in terms of the reading, I would say, as Heritage had. So the history with ours, last year we had a goal of 80% proficient at advanced 4. There were only 2 levels with the reading levels, and we took a look at that data, kind of blew it out of the water, and over 90% of the students do that. So this year, one of the pieces we took a look at in particular was reads at grade level, and Amy had spoke to that a little bit earlier during the presentation as well. But we were looking at reads at grade level. There's multiple measures. The VAS has got guided reading, running records, intervention. We saw 72% last year, so we were going to shoot for 75%, and I was pushing for 80, but I think what we'll do is at our mid-year we will recalibrate and see how things are going at that time, and if we are looking at increasing that up, we will do that. We were really looking at the district goal as well when we were putting ours together, and you know, we want to certainly meet or exceed that 2019 goal, and we feel that this is a way for us to help do that. The second goal, is regards to, our SEL, and particularly with body cues, self-awareness, and how our students can identify different body cues that individuals may be displaying either themselves or seeing from others. That's certainly something that I think we want all kids to be able to do, so they can get those reads on how people are feeling, or how they are feeling themselves. And so for K2, we wrote it as, I don't have it listed on here, but basic for the K2 and more complex for 3 and 4. That basic would be just seeing that someone might be sad or happy, or or there might be some stress. Complex is frustrated and much more some stronger emotions. So and what we just got this week here, our SEL team put together a small little story that was created by AI and with some tweaking that they had to do, and just having students identify the emotion that the character is demonstrating, if they can identify it, and how many could they identify. And then we'll be revisiting that after some time to teach how to read emotions and body cues, and then see if they garner some more cues in terms of identifying from others and from themselves. So Dean, just so I understand, that normally, well, my understanding, and it could be wrong, is that the SEL curriculum is kind of uniform. So that what's happening in the Prairie instruction is happening at Heritage and Arboretum, for example. And so is that part of the kind of right? Not necessarily an SEL curriculum. We don't really have, we have a framework, I would say, for developmental designs is one of our, because Heritage they're using second step as well, along with some of the developmental design. So each of the buildings, I think, are at different spots there. Our staff at Prairie have really delved into a lot of collaboration within their PLCs to develop some pieces that are working. And that's kind of where this kind of stemmed from. Again, just to, self-awareness was one of the pieces that came up from the survey as being something of high need for our students to be able to identify. And so when our SEL team was taking a look at how we can incorporate some of the learning opportunities, they were exploring these options. Okay, so this is an addition to, or it's just more, it's just part of point of emphasis. Yeah, in that particular second, it would be a point of emphasis, but then whole SEL, social emotional learning competencies.
So what do you see as the big benefit of you accomplish that goal? What is it going to gain?
Hopefully students being able to recognize those emotions and to be able to learn how to cope with them and to respond to them appropriately. Because some of the coping is well, I'm going to do that or do something that may not necessarily be appropriate for a response, instead of recognizing that if someone is getting angry, you can maybe have to step back a little bit, not get more in their face. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Dean. Tim, why don't you come on up?
Going by age, yeah. Going by age.
Oh. So we also have a literacy goal, of course, and you can see it there. It's a little summary of what our literacy goal is, but to encapsulate it, I would say that our ELA teachers are focusing on the strategies and interventions they're doing within each unit throughout the school year, to make sure that we're not letting anything fall behind from October to November to December. So they're really focusing on they're following their common formative assessments, that they're working on together. Actually, it's in our goal, we're calibrating. So that is part of the goal. We do that regularly anyway. Not as often as we'd all like to, but we do it, and it's part of the goal and action stuff. But it's really analyzing our data right along the way in each unit, from the start of the unit to the end of the unit, so we can intervene in the middle before it gets to the end of unit test, which we do have, not as much as the upper levels, but there is an end of the unit. You move on to the next standards. So we do have a focus on one particular standard, summarizing, so that will always be sprinkled into every unit. Every unit is focused on a variety of different standards along the way, and some they're usually overlapped. But summarizing is our lowest standard at both the 5th and 6th grade level. So this is the 5th and 6th grade goal. So the benefit of that is we actually have now 14 teachers working on it rather than just 7 and 7. So we are sharing ideas, sharing strategies at all of our PLC meetings. So that's maybe the best summary. That 83%, we're still gathering our baseline data. That's kind of where we think we're going to land. That's not exactly where we might land, but we're using BAS data, we're using our classroom assessment data to figure out where are the kids right now so that we know exactly where they need to go. That's a summary of our literacy goal. Comments or questions on that? Our building goal, it was quite wordy, actually. That's the newer part of our building goal. So our building, the first half of our building goal is as old school as it can get. So we have about 70 staff in our building, and after the 2 years of many very different protocols, we needed to make sure we were all on the same page of how we were handling our routines and expectations in our classrooms, in our hallways, in our building at recess, so that we're all saying the same things and have the same expectations. So we did that all of last year. We felt like there was another piece missing, and we kind of learned this as we went through thinking about that SEL team was always talking about self-management. We thought there was a piece missing, so we wanted to add that piece, continue what we're doing, because I thought we did a nice job as a staff coming to consensus, and everybody has their own little things that they like to do or that really bug them or that they really want, but coming to consensus on what we're all going to do. And it sounds like it should be simple, but 70 people, it's hard to come to that consensus sometimes, but we were able to do that. We wanted to include the student feedback piece. Our students are just beginning to be old enough to have really insightful feedback for us on how things are going and what could be improved. And we broke that down, as you can see, a couple different ways. In the goal, we talk about just their own self-reflection and their own goal setting. What do they want? Where do they want to go? And we're trying to help them understand what a goal is, what that can lead to, and how do you reach a goal? What do you do if you don't reach a goal, which happens to all of us, and how we handle that. So we're talking about that as part of their self-management. We're also in our classrooms, we use the word co-constructing how we want to handle when things aren't going well in the classroom. Maybe the behavior isn't great in the classroom. How are we going to handle that? How do we want to do that? What's the conversation want to look like? So that's all part of this goal. So I'm kind of excited about it. That's what we've been working on the last few weeks, because I'm curious to see how it goes. And we have a survey to get student feedback on themselves. We have a staff survey. We're going to use our different little clubs and groups that we have in our building, our student ambassadors, to try to get feedback along the way and just keep giving us strategies and how we can improve.
Any questions on the second goal for Tim?
So
Thank you, Tim. Jeff, why don't you come up?
That's what you want.
Oh, yeah, wow. Nice.
That's 712.
Yeah.
Thank you for the time. As you have known, if you've been in this community for some number of years, the middle school has long been the school in the district that has struggled with growth. We have had strong academic achievement K-12 across the board, but when we get our kids to middle school, historically speaking, we struggle to get them to grow at a level that the rest of our schools do across the district. And this has been, I would say, a sticking point, a sore point but also a point of focus for us since I've been here to try to flip that on end and go the other direction. And so our goals are really guided towards growth. So when you see on the middle school thing, you won't see so much about what are our assessment scores or achievement scores on the report card, because when you look at the report card, our achievement scores look good. And we start every year off with SII showing staff, here are comparable 7-8 schools demographically and enrollment wise across the state. And we're consistently in the top 5 in academic achievement, and we're consistently in the bottom 5 in student growth across the board. And so we need to do something about that, because there are schools that are our size, match our demographics, are 7-8 schools who do have high achievement and also have high growth. So that's really what we're trying to get. So our first goal is really geared towards using our iReady to really close that gap. It's particularly in literacy. We do this also in math as well, but we're focusing our goal written in literacy specifically. And so we're trying to get 80% of our students to meet their yearly growth goal. Last year, we set the goal at 90%. It was too high. It was actually statistically almost impossible to meet. Tim was very kind to help set me straight on that a little bit. So we did reflect on last year's goal. We did get to 76% last year, which was a really good number for us compared to recent history. We're not satisfied at 76. So we picked a number that was a little bit higher than we did last year, so we can try to get a little bit better, but maybe isn't quite at a more impossible goal. And someplace that also our staff, they were on board with, but they felt good about, like, if we got to 76, I think 80 is a good number for us to shoot at as we get better with some of the things we started last year and continue that work moving forward this year. So we're looking to continue to really hone our skills with how we use our iReady platform. So that's the thing we give 3 times a year in the fall, winter, and spring. We have a sheet that we give to our students that has their current score, what their growth score should be, and their progress towards it. So when we get to winter, we'll give them, hey, here's what your fall score was, here's how you're progressing towards your overall goal, and then where you're at right now. We encourage through communications home and through some time we spend at school with our kids during our non-direct instructional time, using that iReady platform, because it does cater to the students' individual needs within a number of different areas in literacy. So the kids certainly more in one than the other, a student can work on it independently at school or at home, because it's web-based. So they could do it at home if they wanted to help move their growth along. So our goal is to try to get that platform to be a little bit more a part of what we do, a part of who we are, and also a part of how we partner with our families so that we're moving our growth in the right direction. The iReady suite is relatively new to us. It's something we started a couple years ago. So, and we also have new staff coming on board. We've had 17 new staff members in the last 2 years. So that too is helping us get them on board with how do we use this suite? How do you help support kids? And how do we maintain fidelity in our everyday curriculum while also providing this resource as well to supplement that work we're doing in the classroom. So that's our first goal. We're looking at also scheduling some visits, scheduling some visits, there we go, to some schools that we know have high growth and high achievement, and taking some staff members there to kind of look at what do they do from a standpoint of instructional practices, how does their day look, how do they support students who are struggling, and so to find what we can learn from those schools. There's a group of about 3 of them in the Green Bay area, which would be like a day trip for us, and then a group of a couple in the Milwaukee area, which would also be a separate day trip. So we're hoping to plan those this year as well and use the information we gather there to not only look at our instructional practices, but as we continue to revamp our curriculum, both mathematics and ELA, and also look at, as you well know, our schedule, try to make sure that we're doing the things that are going to put us in a spot for success, not only in the short term, but in the long term. So that's really the nuts and bolts of that first bullet point. Any questions on that?
Just compliment you on, you know, again, not just you, but what we're hearing is just really exciting as a board member. Very positive impact, looking for a positive impact on our kids. So your planning is
It's a nice segue too, because when you say positive impact on kids, the next piece is about the culture and climate in our building. And You want your kids to achieve at a high level, but you also want them to feel like they're in the right place. You want them to feel like, hey, this is a school for me. No matter who you are walking through the front door, it's going to help me grow as both an academic student, but also as a community member. And so what we're really trying to do is establish this a little bit better feel in our building, not only with our students, with our adults, how we behave as adults models what our kids see. And it's important that we continue to model within our building, like how do we collaborate, how do we work together, how do we talk to each other, how do kids see us talking to other kids, so that we know that not only do we have high expectations, but we're kind. And you can do both. You don't have to have high expectations and be mean. You don't have to have low expectations and be kind. There is a way to do it, which is part of why in this goal, and just going back, the reason we picked this goal is our staff were surveyed back in spring of last year about what's the one thing you think we need to do to really help our adults do what we need to do to serve our children. And it came back pretty much unanimously, we need to work on our climate culture. And so this is driven by staff. They know it too. They're willing to work on it. So we have things now we're putting in place. We're putting a climate and culture team together that's going to help do things to help make sure we're working with how does staff feel in the building, how do we build that kind of camaraderie, celebrate the positive things that we're doing, and focus on what we can do to continue to learn from each other and get better. We had 13 people attend the PLC Institute this last summer. They're focusing on what is the big five from one of the sections that they went to, and that's helping us understand how do we look at data, how do we then use that data to help continuing our growth in our students and not have our assessments be our students either learned it or they didn't. It's they've learned it, let's help them grow from there, or they haven't learned it, let's help them get there still. It's not a finite thing. So that PLC team is working on some of those things. And then we also have our SEL committee, which is being a little bit revamped with some new leadership this year. And those people are looking to see how do we really get to the point where we're working with our students, real specifically on self-management and self-awareness. Like, how do you understand, how do you make sure you're ready for learning? And how do you are aware of how your behavior impacts those around you? I think a lot of our staff's frustration last year came from some of the student behavior things that aren't so familiar with what we've seen in the past, but are things that we want to just get better at. When we see it, how do we manage it? And how do we systemically work together as both teaching staff and administration to make sure we're responding more effectively and efficiently than we have in the past? I think we've gotten by with limited responses and really pretty darn good kids. And overall, a lot less, real issues. And we've seen some more things, not that there's a lot of problems, but we need to maybe try some things that we haven't had to do in the past. And there are things that we can do. And if we collaborate, work together, I think we're going to see a level of success as long as we are communicating expectations and then talking amongst ourselves as adults and making sure that if something's not working, we're not just going to keep doing it for 7 months and then go, well, that didn't work. And so we seem to get better there as well.
Any questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Brian, come on up. And Sheila, you're on deck.
Ian's trying to.
Back here. All right, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. So our first goal, it is truly redefining ready. So if you're not familiar with what redefining ready is, we broke it out for you. So these are college ready, career ready goals. So if you look up redefining ready, you can just do a quick search. It'll break it all down, how these fall into each category. Last year, when we were building our goal, there was a conversation in our School Improvement Institute that oftentimes we have an academic goal that is not really something that all of our staff could address. But with this goal, and we're just continuing to follow it from last year to build up to that by spring of 2025 and get back to 2019 results. These are the different categories that we're focused on, as opposed to when we used to chase an ACT score. That is a really challenging thing because we can look at pre-ACT scores for our 9th and 10th graders now. And then our 11th graders take ACT, we get the results, they're gone. That's it. That's all. We don't have them again. So, and what we found when it was Aspire, that our 9th graders maybe were lacking in one area in something. So we could focus on that with 9th grade students. Our next year, 10th grade students. It was always changing, it's fluid, it's moving, it's a true challenge, but this is something we felt like we could lock in on. For 4 years of a student, and redefining ready is created by superintendents around the country. Felt like these are the indicators of either being successful in college and or career. So if you accomplish these things, we move these numbers. That's what we're trying to do, is address more, I'd say, more holistic approach to our goal, as opposed to trying to chase an elusive number that's constantly changing because the kids are changing. So our staff like this, I like this. I think this is good for us to monitor all these things, because there are many components to it, as opposed to trying to hone in on one thing, fix that, then the kids take the ACT, and maybe we did change it. Now we got to start all over because the next group has a completely different need. Some of the things, just a few of the things that we're addressing this year. We are bringing some ACT prep into our advisory, so that's part of the discussion too. We'll do pre-ACT prep, just test prep. How do you take these tests? We have many kids take that ACT prep course, but there's only room for like 30 or 40 kids. So we'd like to get that to the whole school. Attendance is something that we're really focused back in on. This year we have assistant principals out chasing it down, and the kids love that, and they like us going after every absence, so they're super excited about that. But these things are things that we can hone in on, encouraging kids to be involved in co-curriculars. We push that in all the class meetings, get involved, do it, go to the co-curricular fair, sign up for something. And so we're doing well with that. I would say the hardest number for us to chase right now, because we don't have a good process for it, is the service hours. That's something students need for when they're applying for colleges. That's self-reported. So we're trying to come up with a system to be better about that. And then the question always is, well, can't we make it a part of graduation? And I say, no, I don't want that. It's a great idea, but it's a lot to manage. And it's one more thing for our kids to do. Sometimes kids are working many hours a week, and getting them to do service hours too is complicated. So we've kind of left that out. But when just to kind of go back to this, when we looked at all this data this summer, some good, some we got some work to do. So it kind of falls in both areas. So I'm going to pause there if there's any questions about this right now.
Why did you single out the freshmen and the seniors on this?
Because that's what redefining that does.
You know why they do that?
Because if you can have a successful freshman year, you're setting the foundation, you're most likely going to be okay. A kid that ends up with 6.5 credits after their freshman year, they rarely do we see them fall off. They generally are the ones that they're fine. If you can just get through freshman year, pretty much unscathed, they're usually okay. It's rare that you see a kid that had a really good freshman or sophomore year and then all of a sudden just falls off as a junior and senior and struggles. It happens, but it's less. All right. Second goal is pretty much the exact same goal that we had last year. We use our advisory time to do a survey with our students 4 times a year on school climate. The only part of this that we changed is that we're going to compare it from one part of the year to the last year. So October to October, December to December, as opposed from year to year. So we're dealing with a new group of kids every year that we're surveying, obviously. So it's going year to year doesn't really work, but we figured if we go like month to like month, we're going to get a good idea of where we're at. Because maybe in December, I think Dean was, or was it, you said it, maybe when he's talking about when that survey was given out for our staff. Dan, sorry guys, I mixed it up. My deputy tripped me on that stuff. So we want to make sure that maybe December is not the best month to survey kids. Maybe they're not in a good mindset then, and we can glean that information from there. But we do use that survey during the year, and we look at that We want kids to be comfortable in school. We want our staff to be comfortable. And so that's part of this evaluation process, making sure students are comfortable in school, they're feeling supported, and that we have their backs and we want them to be successful. So that's it. I got it.
Questions? Comments? Thank you very much.
All right.
Thanks, Brian.
I'm gonna, yeah, don't trick me on that.
I go the other way.
I'll go on this.
I'll put the other.
Penis.
Jeff can get it. Okay, that's you.
Welcome, Sheila.
Let's start on in. Let's start on
Start right on it.
Let's go.
Let's go. So our,
Did you get off the bus?
Oh.
I bet you were driving.
you knew about the bus? Is this being recorded?
Yes.
I was on the bus, but then honestly, I also walked so that the bus could get back and make the 5:12. And I should have thought just to walk here because it would have been shorter than coming like, right, but I was like, get back. So yes, it was a great bus ride and a good walk, extra steps. So thank you for your patience. So Arboretum has 2 building goals. We always focus on growing our students certainly and growing our staff at the same time. Our first building goal is around common formative assessments, and we really track and keep data around our students in our common formatives that aren't proficient at our learning targets. So our essential learning outcomes or our I can statements, that's what kids would tell you they are, and that's what's posted in the room. And those change as they're moving through a unit. And we primarily do them in reading and math and writing, really those 3 areas. And so what happens is a common formative assessment is identified in a week in that area. And then out of those students that aren't meeting that target, either a quick lesson or a series of pieces are done separate from our intervention enrichment time. It's usually within the small group time in the classroom. And then we monitor by the time the summative assessment comes around, have they mastered it? And we also like to track, what did we do? Was it a specific lesson? Was it a small group that met 2 or 3 times? We're really trying to hone in on what are the best pieces we do to raise achievement. So it really targets in, because when you see 75%, you might think, really just 75%, but keep in mind, 75% of the students who didn't make the mark. So it could be that there's 4 in the classroom, and so we already know that the other 20 some have done fine in that mark. So that's what our common formative data and growth is around, and that takes a big lift within our PLCs for our teachers to identify which are the most essential targets. How might they measure it? When are they talking about it? Is it at the very next PLC meeting? In the next week, is it a week piece? So I don't know if you have questions about that.
Yeah, so it really sounds good. Am I right to assume that when you say 75% of the students who score below expectations, that's not necessarily just our low achieving students, but could be high achieving who aren't meeting what they need to get. So you're really addressing all levels of the students, not just the low achieving ones.
You're right. So every student has that common formative, and then who is in that group that we're going to do something with before the summative changes, and it's fluid. You're welcome. This just brings a beautiful depth to the work that we do too with our teaching staff. It's wonderful. And then the next one, we have the earliest learners who are always working at how to be independent learners as well. So when you take a look at where we want to grow kiddos, it's in self-management, self-awareness, and focused attention. And you heard some of those pieces from other buildings as well. And so what we do is we have resources, our teachers plan by grade levels, and then our specials also plan as a specials group. And we work to find these types of activities and really support our students growing in that. There are sections on the report card too that, link to that, but for us, it's really at this point, engaging 95% of our learners in that. Typically, our number is going to come out higher than that. We think we haven't done a baseline like that before. But we want them to grow in those areas. And I think in the future, we would be looking, hey, here's our baseline. Now we can look at some growth in those pieces and help our youngest students become more independent learners as well and gain those skills.
Questions, comments?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Again, before you go, I just would like to thank all of you. I think you've offered a commitment to literacy, a commitment to the personal growth and development. But you've also, all of you shared a really, to me, important insight into how your staff work with your collaborations. Everyone's well with your, well, why are we doing PLC? And that whole collaborative effort between staff and administration, building administration, to get the literacy right, to get the achievement right, to get the climate right. It's good to hear that. And so I really appreciate on behalf of our committee, thank you for the time you put into coming to share this with us. And it's pretty good stuff. Thank you.
And with that, I think we are on to items for future meetings. And thank you again for our principals extending your time here when you've got other things back in your schools that want your attention. Next meeting, you will be joined again by Jeff. Jeff will be providing you an update on where things stand with our anticipated middle school schedule changes, what the works look like, what the proposal is, what it might take to implement that well. We'll also be looking to hear from you about your input and what you're looking for our special curriculum meetings. Those are the meetings where we have 4 departments, they come in and they update you on what they're working on. We want to know what your target is for us. So that will be an item at the next meeting. It'll also be on the agenda. So if it comes hot off the press that morning, you'll get it that afternoon. If the state assessment data is off embargo from DPI, and it very well might by October 17th, we'll have that in the next meeting as well. And we'll be sure to bring back that missing spring 2023 iReady data.
I have a quick question about these. Is this
Absolutely.
for our users? Are these going to be posted? Or these documents?
That's a wonderful question. I'm glad you circled us back to that, Katie. So first of all, we wanted these to come to you so we could, in line with our overall achievement goals, get you exactly what you experienced this evening, a update from our principals about what our school improvement goals are for this year. However, this document is one that if it hit the mark, and I think it sounds like around the table in terms of information, this has been well received. This is something that I know Randy would like to see go to all of our families at each school, and then we would put it on the website for the community at large so they can understand what our school improvement goals for this year are. So it's for you first.
Yeah.
Because we wanted to kind of see how it resonated with you. But then, yes, Randy's intention is this is going to be more broadly distributed.
Awesome. Okay. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.